In today's episode, we're going to discuss the itchy Dogo Argentino and some home-based solutions that can help speed relief to your furry friend. Thanks for joining me. You are awesome. It's Nicole from Dogo Argentino, USA. In today's episode, we are going to discuss the itchy Dogo Argentino and some things that you can do to help speed relief to your friend. Because we've all been itchy, and to be honest, it kind of sucks. So let's talk about some symptoms of itchiness in case you're not sure what you're seeing. Is the skin red? Is the dog itching, like literally scratching at it? Is it swollen? Does there appear to be hives? Does it seem like the dog is pawing at its ears, pawing at its feet, pawing at some part of the body, its nose? Does it seem like it's sneezing a lot? Does it appear to be really relentlessly grooming some part of its body, whether it's in between the toes or anal grooming? Those can all be signs of itchiness. So when do you take the dog to the vet? Well, has it been going on a while? And by a while, I mean more than a day or two. Has it been getting worse? Has the skin become broken? Is there weeping or open sores? Those are all signs that it is getting worse and you need to take it to the vet. Now, part of the issue with Dogo Argentinos is that they tend to suffer from allergies and skin conditions and skin problems in certain bloodlines. I am tremendously blessed that mine do not. But it is a common theme. I hear people tell me all the time, what can I do? How can I help? And sometimes the solutions are very minor and sometimes they are serious. More on the serious side, you may need to get shots on a monthly basis that help quell the allergies. On the minor side, well, that's what we're going to talk about today, is 7 different possible solutions to temporary mild itchiness. So let's talk about my favorite homemade anti-itch spray. Apple cider vinegar, ACV, is an awesome anti-itch solution that you can make at home. You want to use 50% apple cider vinegar, 50% water, mix it up and put it in a spray bottle. And that becomes your anti-itch spray. And you can spray it between the toes, you can spray it under the armpits, wherever the dog seems to be suffering. Now it is of course going to smell like apple cider vinegar, but particularly if you're having a problem with chewing of the toes or chewing in between the toes or constantly licking, that can actually soothe them in the sense that the bitterness is going to keep them from licking and chewing for a little bit. So it's going to let the skin recover. And the important thing before you use ACV, you have to examine the Dogo Argentino really thoroughly because you want to make sure that it doesn't have any open wounds, because apple cider vinegar is a mild acid. And so if you put it on an open wound, it's going to make it very sore and very painful. So you don't want to apply it to any skin that's broken. But apple cider vinegar, great for mild temporary itchiness, particularly between the toes. Soak it, that'll get the dog off of that area. And if you prefer not to make your own, you can use a product called bitter apple, which is essentially apple cider vinegar. But making your own is going to be a lot less expensive. So I encourage you to go that route first. Okay, so imagine your Dogo Argentino is not getting enough fatty oils in the diet and the itchiness is coming from the inside, but it's mild. You can try to beef up their diet using some fatty oils, and my favorite is going to be coconut oil. Coconut oil on the outside of the skin can be applied like a balm, similar to chapstick, and it can soothe an irritated area. Now, you do want to make sure that you're not making the dog greasy, because you don't want to attract the licking to that area once you put it on, because then it's just going to lick the balm off. Now, the other way that you can address a lack of oils in the diet is by putting a little bit of coconut oil in their food. Whether you feed raw, whether you feed kibble, makes no difference. Now, as always, you do have to know, if you haven't been here before, I'm not a veterinarian, I am a dog enthusiast. So before you do any major changes to your Dogo Argentino's diet, consult your vet. He is the expert. But a little bit of coconut oil can be very helpful in the diet. I like, depending on the dog, to start out with maybe a teaspoon and make sure that it's well tolerated, and then work my way up to a tablespoon every few days. You don't want it to go too much, too heavy, because it can make the stools runny by having a very heavy amount of coconut oil. But a little bit of coconut oil, they seem to like it. I do recommend that you get organic, preferably non-pasteurized raw coconut oil. And the reason that is because coconut oil is bam, 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 antibacterial, antifungal, and is very, very well tolerated in terms of the diet. So it can be great. Antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, but only if it's raw. Once you start to pasteurize that product, meaning that you add heat, you are killing that good effect of the antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. So just bear that in mind. Try to get the highest grade coconut oil that you can. And most of dogs seem to really, really like it. It's actually a treat. They're like, ooh, coconut oil. Okay, so what else can you do? Oatmeal baths. Now, a word about baths. One, you want to make sure the temperature is not too hot to tolerate. If it hurts by putting it on your wrist, it's too hot. The other thing is baths should be used infrequently. And if you do frequent baths, the problem is that you'll actually strip the oils out of the hair and the skin, and that will consequently make the dog more itchy. So you don't want to do that to your dogo. You want to use occasional baths. Like in terms of a thorough bath, I'm very fortunate that my dogos don't suffer from allergies, but occasionally they'll get itchy if they've, done something crazy like rolled in an anthill or something. That's a very temporary type of thing that you can address at home. But the baths, you want to make sure that you're not doing a lot. I would say, I wouldn't want a bath, even the medicinal variety, to be more than every 2 or 3 weeks. And that would be at the outside. Now, in terms of oatmeal, it's really important you get plain sugar-free oatmeal. And the reason you want to use plain sugar-free oatmeal, the sugar kind is going to be a problem if the dog has a fungal condition specifically, because fungus feed on sugar. So in terms of your oatmeal, stay away from the breakfast variety. You are not looking for maple sugar oatmeal. You have to use plain oatmeal. Throw about a cup of it in your blender, blend it up really well. You're trying to pulverize it into a powder. Put it in the bath, mix it up pretty well, make sure the temperature is tolerable, and then get the dogo to sit in the bath for 10 to 20 minutes. And this can be a little bit of a chore because the dogs don't always want to sit in the water. So mine don't mind at all. They'll totally sit there. But for some, that might be more of an issue than others. So if it's an issue, maybe stay away from this particular method of helping itchiness out. Okay, so along with the medicinal bath variety, you can use chamomile tea. And what you want to do in this case is get about 8 to 10 tea bags, put it in a very hot bath, and allow them to steep. And once the bath turns tea colored and cools down, which should take about 10 minutes, maybe a little less, again, test the water, put the dog in the bath, gather up the tea bags, and you can actually use those over hot spots. You want to make sure that your dogo doesn't eat them. That would be very bad, A, because there are staples in tea bags. Very bad, do not let them eat them. But B, you don't want that amount of tea, which would cause vomiting. That would be horrible. So you do have to have a certain amount of infant in bathwater type control over your dogo. But you can gather up the wet tea bags, put them against the skin, hold them there for a minute or two, and it can be very soothing to hot spots. And if you don't have chamomile tea, you can also use green tea, and that will be a similar substitute in terms of the baths. If you know what a poultice is, awesome. I'm going to describe how to make one. If you don't, easy peasy. A poultice just means really you're making a medicinal mash or a medicinal mud. It's 50% water, 50% of the ingredient. In this case, it is very, very important you do not allow the dogo to lick it, because I'm going to recommend baking soda, which can really take the sting out of hives. And a little bit of that mush over the hive, make sure the dog doesn't eat it. It's an outside of the dogo only ingredient. Put the mush or the poultice against that hive or the bee sting or the ant bite, whatever it is, and hold it there with your hand. basically until it heats up and becomes warm from the heat of your hand and the heat of the dog, and that will take some of the inflammation and the sting out of hives specifically. But remember, infant in the bath water level supervision, they cannot lick it. You don't want that at all because it is toxic. So, but it's really good for like spot stings and bites and things. Okay, so the next item I'm going to recommend is specifically for infestations of biting insects like fleas. And what you want to do, you can order this on Amazon, get some food grade diatomaceous earth. There will be links in the description below the video. Make sure it's food grade, not filter grade. Get yourself a mask, and you're going to take some of that food grade diatomaceous earth and you're going to sprinkle the powder over the flooring. And you can leave it there between 1 and 3 days depending on the severity of the outbreak. And it is going to act like a shredder. It uses mechanical action to destroy insects. It's going to destroy fleas, it's going to destroy bed bugs, it's just going to shred anything it comes in contact with. But it's very important you don't breathe it in. That is not okay. So you're going to vacuum up after 1 to 3 days, and you can apply again if you have a second outbreak, because it only affects the adults. It doesn't affect any eggs. So if you have fleas, for example, there's always a cycle of fleas where you have an adult, they lay eggs, and the eggs come out after 2 to 3 weeks later. So you may have to have multiple treatments. You can also use it in the yard. Do bear in mind that it is not effective, or not as effective, in very high humidity areas. It's most effective in areas that are either cold or use dry heat as their weather. Very, very humid heat, it tends to clump up. It doesn't work very well. But you can also use it internally, and it can get rid of parasites internally, only if it's the food grade. Only use it occasionally. If you're interested in something like that, that's going to tell you a natural treatment for deworming, let me know with a comment below, and we will chat about that in a future video. So the most important things, make sure it's food grade, not filter grade. Use a mask at all times. Use rubber gloves because it is a desiccant. It is very, very drying to the skin, so you definitely don't want to get it on your skin. And bear in mind that it's mechanical and it works for adults, but not for eggs. Okay, so the last thing that I would like to talk about is changing your dog's diet. And that is going to have the most long-lasting and profound effect to avoid itchiness in the Dogo Argentino. Now, if itchiness is just environmental, meaning your dog has been exposed to a bee and it's itchy because it has a hive or a sting or a bite, that's the easiest type of itchiness to address because it's very, very temporary. If it's genetic, in terms of your Dogo Argentino came from a bloodline that is tainted with allergy sensitivity, you could be benefited by some of these home remedies, but there's a lot of things that are going to require veterinary intervention. And I've been told that some of the shots on the really severe level are quite expensive, as in like $100 or more a month, possibly for life, depending on the severity of the allergic reaction, which is why if you're looking for a Dogo Argentino puppy, I encourage you to get one from lines that have not shown known allergies, because the dog will suffer its whole life, and it will cause the dog a whole lot of tears and unhappiness, you a whole lot of tears and unhappiness. It's very expensive, and it's just so sad to see dogs that suffer from skin disorders. It's terrible. But one of the things that you can try, ask your vet first, is a raw diet. And I have seen a raw diet help so many dogs that had itchiness problems. And some of the most common culprits that seem to cause systemic inflammation in the Dogo Argentino are grains, particularly wheat and corn, and also poultry for some reason, and any poultry derivatives. So that would be chicken, turkey, duck, eggs of the same. They seem to be the most common culprits for allergies. Now, it is my opinion. Let me just tell you, totally unproven. Do not take this to the bank. It is my opinion that the reason that poultry are such a huge source of problems in the diet, whether it's kibble or even raw, is that they are shot up with hormones from the get-go. I mean, they just use tons and tons and tons of hormones and antibiotics and antivirals, and they're like a walking chemistry experiment. And part of that is because of big agriculture doesn't raise large amounts of animals in the most, what I would consider to be, humane environment possible. It's like, hey, here's a building with 15,000 chickens and they are all smushed in together, and it's just not a natural method of raising livestock. And so to combat the fact that the animals don't have a lot of room, they are using antibiotics and things and shooting them up to try to keep the disease level low in that tight condition. And so it is my opinion that the meat becomes tainted by that, and that is one of the reasons that it can be difficult. Now, to a lesser degree, some dogs also have problems with beef, but it is my experience that beef that is grass-raised seems to cause almost no problems, and it's only beef that is corn-raised or corn-finished that does have problems. Again, I think it's actually changing the inner chemistry of the animal based on feeding it something that it would not eat in its natural state. So if you go raw, and I do have videos on raw, so check them out. I never know which side. They're on some side of the screen, but you can check those out. I encourage you to start slow. I encourage you to start one protein at a time, and you have to give it quite a while. I would say 2 weeks to a month to see an effect at the earliest, and it can be as long as 3 or 4 months depending on what it is. But start with one protein source at a time. So for example, you might want to start with lamb and only go with lamb so that you can actually clock what's happening with your Dogo Argentino. And you want to make sure it's well tolerated, that they enjoy it, you know, stuff like that. But I have seen changing over a diet from kibble into raw does seem to help quite a lot of Dogo Argentinos. So as always, I have to ask, please, pretty please, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. As always, let me know your thoughts. I will see you in the comments, and have a Dogo-tastic day, guys. Thanks.